That dog is government property worth $185,000, not a pet, a weapon of war.
That's what they told him. But Logan Hayes wasn't fighting to keep a weapon. He was fighting to keep the soul that pulled him from an ambush and stayed with him through every nightmare after the war. They said the law had no room for feelings. They said procedures couldn't be bent for one man's pain. But what if someone with the power to change everything was already on his way? This is the story of loyalty, of loss, and a promise no one gets left behind.
Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told.
Let's uncover what really happened.
The wheels of Logan Hayes' wheelchair rolled quietly over the polished marble of the courthouse hallway.
The building was silent, save for the occasional echo of footsteps from distant court officers.
The light filtering through the narrow windows was pale and cold, casting long shadows across the corridor.
Each turn of the wheel felt heavier than the last.
Walking beside him, never straying more than an arm's length away, was Ekko. A German shepherd with a coat like burnished bronze and eyes alert with the calm intensity of a seasoned soldier. There was no leash between them.
There didn't need to be. Ekko knew every move Logan would make before it happened.
Inside the courtroom, the air shifted cooler, sterile, the kind of room where rules lived and emotion came to die. Dark wood panels lined the walls. A single American flag hung near the bench, its colors muted under fluorescent lights. Logan took a breath and wheeled forward.
All eyes turned.
Some recognized the uniform jacket draped neatly over his lap, adorned with medals, one sleeve empty. Others stared at the man himself, seeing the weathered face of someone who had walked through fire.
But most people looked at the dog.
Ekko padded beside him, every step purposeful.
He wasn't just a service animal.
He was the reason Logan was still breathing.
But what would happen when the court ruled against their bond? Emily sat in the front row.
She was 17, poised but pale, her hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes were locked on her father and the dog beside him. As he reached his place before the bench, she bit her lip. The judge entered.
A firm voice announced, "All rise." Everyone stood. Logan remained seated.
Judge Meredith Clay took her seat behind the elevated desk, glancing down at the files before her.
Her expression was unreadable. "Sergeant Logan Hayes," she said.
"We are here today to review the contested reassignment of military working dog Ekko, currently classified as property of the United States Department of Defense.
Ekko has been scheduled for reassignment to an active unit pending evaluation. You are requesting an exemption from that reassignment. Is that correct?" Logan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor."
"Very well," she replied, setting the file aside.
"You may begin." Logan cleared his throat, his hand resting on Ekko's back. The dog didn't move.
"I served with Ekko for 3 years in Afghanistan," Logan began. "He was assigned to our unit as an explosives detection dog. But he became much more than that."
He paused.
The courtroom was silent, save for the soft humming of overhead lights. "IEDs were our worst nightmare," Logan continued.
"Hidden everywhere, roadways, doorways, even under toys left by kids. We lost good men. Ekko found most of those devices before we did. He saved lives again and again."
He took a slow breath, glancing at the judge. "But it's not just what he did over there. It's what he's done since I came home." He touched his leg, the one that was no longer there. "I came back with a part of me missing. Not just physically. Nightmares, anxiety, the dark days.
Ekko never left my side. When I couldn't sleep, he stayed awake.
When I had panic attacks, he'd lay across my chest until my heart slowed.
He knew before I did when I was breaking." Judge Clay didn't react.
She listened, unblinking. Logan's voice broke just slightly.
"I owe my life to this dog, and now they want to take him back." She finally spoke. "Sergeant Hayes, we respect your service.
Your words are moving, but the law is not built on sentiment.
Ekko is listed as a federal asset. His reassignment is based on active unit needs, not emotional bonds." Ekko looked up at Logan as if sensing the shift. The judge continued, "Do you have documentation to support your claim of medical necessity for retaining Ekko as a service animal?"
Logan's lawyer seated beside him stood, "Yes, Your Honor.
We've submitted records from 2 VA psychiatrists and a licensed trauma therapist, all confirmed that separation from Ekko could significantly harm Mr. Hayes' mental health."
The judge took the folder and flipped through it silently.
Meanwhile, Ekko didn't move.
His gaze was fixed, but his body remained calm. He was trained for rooms like this, trained to wait, to protect.
Emily watched every movement.
She gripped her mother's bracelet in one hand, the last keepsake of the woman who had passed 5 years ago, just before Logan's final deployment. Her father was all she had. Ekko had helped hold him together.
She knew it better than anyone.
When the judge looked up again, her eyes were sharper.
"This is difficult," she admitted. "You've made a compelling case. But the Department of Defense has already approved Ekko's reassignment to a handler in an active unit. That handler has been waiting 3 weeks.
They believe this dog could save more lives."
Logan exhaled. "He already saved mine."
The judge nodded slowly.
"That may be true, but the law isn't about what we feel. It's about what is written." Logan sat back, eyes dimming. Emily swallowed a cry. The judge looked down at the file again.
"This court will reconvene after lunch.
A final decision will be issued this afternoon."
With a rap of her gavel, she stood and exited the courtroom. The courtroom filled again after the lunch recess, the chatter low and restrained. Logan sat in the same spot, Ekko at his side, calm and unmoving. The way the dog carried himself, composed, disciplined, made it easy to forget he was the center of a legal dispute.
But that's what Ekko had become. A matter of paperwork, not partnership.
The judge re-entered, nodding briefly to the clerk.
"We're back on record. Defense counsel, please proceed."
A sharp-suited man stood from the opposite table, military-leaning posture, clean-shaven, with a voice rehearsed for persuasion.
His name was Major Calvin Price, legal representative for the Department of Defense.
"Your Honor," he began, "we fully acknowledge Sergeant Hayes' honorable service. However, the subject of this petition, military working dog Ekko, is not and has never been a personal companion.
He is a federally funded, highly trained tactical asset.
The government invested over $185,000 into Ekko's training, deployment, and maintenance.
This is not emotional. This is logistics."
He turned to the gallery, then back to the bench.
"Ekko has been designated for reassignment to an active explosives unit in North Carolina.
The handler waiting for him is preparing for a deployment where Ekko's expertise will very likely save more lives.
We cannot substitute sentiment for protocol." Logan didn't move, but his hands clenched the armrest.
Major Price continued, "If we begin creating exemptions for every emotionally compelling case, we'll undermine the system that keeps soldiers alive. These dogs are bred and trained with one purpose, to serve where needed."
Logan's attorney rose.
"With respect, Your Honor, Ekko is not just a number in a system.
He is medically documented as essential to Mr. Hayes' PTSD recovery.
The law may recognize him as property, but the science recognizes him as treatment." Judge Clay listened, expression unchanged. Logan leaned forward, his voice quieter now, but filled with steel.
"He's not a device. He's not a machine.
You can't replace what he does."
"Not for me." Major Price folded his arms. "You're asking to strip the military of a critical tool."
Logan's voice hardened.
"I'm asking to keep the reason I'm not dead." The silence that followed was painful.
Even Ekko seemed to still further, his ears flicking back, reading the room. From the front row, Emily squeezed her hands together, her gaze fixed on her father. Her throat tightened with every word spoken. She had been there on the nights when Logan screamed in his sleep, soaked in sweat and reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. She had seen Ekko leap onto the bed, pressing his weight across Logan's chest, grounding him in the present. She had watched her father go from a man lost in memory to someone who smiled again because of that dog. But none of that was part of the legal file. Judge Clay shifted in her seat.
Do you have anything further, Mr. Price? Yes, Your Honor. Simply this. We do not question Sergeant Hayes's trauma. We question the precedence of exempting a service animal who has been reassigned under federal protocol. Understood. Logan didn't speak again. His lawyer whispered something, but Logan barely heard. His eyes were on Ekko. The dog's tail gave one small wag, brushing against Logan's boot. But could a miracle still change the outcome? Outside the courtroom, the sky had dimmed. Clouds gathered. Rain was on the way. Emily reached into her bag and felt the edge of a folded envelope. She had mailed it 2 weeks ago. Addressed to General Raymond Beckett, retired. Inside a letter in her own handwriting. Dear General Beckett, I don't know if you remember my father, Logan Hayes. He once saved your life. He doesn't talk about it much, but I've heard enough to know it matters. They're trying to take Ekko away from him, the dog that brought him home from the war and kept him going afterward. My dad is strong, but not even he can survive another goodbye. If you can help, please do something. She hadn't told her dad. She didn't want to give him false hope. But now, as the storm gathered outside and the court inched toward a final decision, she prayed for the one thing no lawyer could deliver, a miracle. The clock struck 3. Inside the courtroom, the air had changed. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. As if even the walls were holding their breath. The lawyers had said all there was to say. The judge had listened to every argument, every submission, every eye and shift of emotion. Now she sat, expression unreadable, flipping through the last of the documents. Her pen clicked open, then closed again. Click. Silence. Ekko lay quietly at Logan's feet, ears forward but motionless. Logan sat upright in his chair, his shoulders squared, but there was a crack in the steel that hadn't been there before. He looked smaller now, not broken, never that, but carrying the weight of one more war he might not win. Emily sat a few feet away, hands trembling in her lap. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. Her eyes had stayed locked on her father, then on the judge, then on Ekko, then back again in an endless loop of desperation. No one else in the courtroom moved either. No whispers, no phones. Even the reporters held their breath. The judge finally looked up. Her gaze was steady as it swept across the room. I want to begin by thanking everyone for their conduct today, Judge Meredith Clay said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This has been a difficult case, both legally and emotionally. She paused, and that pause felt longer than anything that had come before. We are here today not to question the heroism of Sergeant Logan Hayes. That is without dispute. Nor are we here to debate the value of Ekko as a companion. That too is evident. Logan stared ahead, unmoving. Emily's eyes welled up, but she didn't blink. What we are tasked with, the judge continued, is determining whether an exception can be made to existing military procedure, whether a federally classified working dog, a trained valuable asset, can be retained or reassigned outside the chain of command for personal reasons. She closed the folder in front of her. The law is not an instrument of comfort, she said. It cannot be bent every time a story breaks our hearts. To do so would create precedent, and precedent has consequences beyond this courtroom. The words fell like stones. I find no legal grounds, she said, her voice quiet now, to overrule the Department of Defense reassignment. Emily's breath caught audibly. Logan closed his eyes, and for the first time since the hearing began, his shoulders sagged just slightly. Ekko lifted his head, sensing the shift. The room remained still. I am deeply sympathetic to the testimony presented, Judge Clay added, and I urge the department to consider long-term accommodations in future cases, but as of now, Ekko is to be returned to the military within 72 hours. She reached for the gavel. Emily's heart felt like it stopped. She reached forward, but her hand froze in the air. Logan didn't move. He was bracing for the sound. The final sound. The sound of a war lost without bullets. The gavel rose. Then, a sound cut through the silence. A sound no one expected. a deep, sudden growl. All heads turned. Ekko! He had risen from his position. His body tense, ears pinned, eyes locked forward. Logan opened his eyes, confused. Ekko, he whispered. The dog stepped forward, placing himself directly between Logan and the judge's bench, not aggressive, but guarding. Then, the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. Wood smacked against wall with force, making half the room flinch. Gasps echoed. A figure stepped into the doorway, tall, commanding, wearing full uniform. The light from the hallway behind him cast a long silhouette across the floor. The man took 3 steps in, slow, deliberate. Logan turned fully toward the commotion. Emily's mouth fell open. Even Judge Clay looked stunned. The man approached the center of the courtroom. Then he stopped, standing tall. "My name," he said, "is General Raymond Beckett." Silence, complete. Not a breath, not a cough. "I believe this court is reviewing the reassignment of a military K-9 named Ekko," he continued. "And I believe I may have something to say about that." He reached into his coat and pulled out a single document, thick, stamped, and sealed. "Your Honor," he said, turning to the bench. "This is a signed override from the Department of Defense." No one moved. He walked forward and handed the document to the bailiff. "Ekko," he said, glancing toward the dog, "is no longer a military asset. As of this morning, he has been honorably discharged. Full custody is to be granted to his former handler, Sergeant Logan Hayes." The room erupted, not in noise, but in energy, like a wave of disbelief rushing forward. Judge Clay took the paper, eyes scanning the signatures. General Beckett stepped forward closer now to Logan. He looked down at the man in the wheelchair and for the first time in decades, his voice broke slightly. "You saved my life in Afghanistan, Hayes," he said. "You and that dog." Logan could only stare. Beckett nodded once, then turned toward the bench again. "With your permission, Your Honor, I'd like to say one more thing." Judge Clay, composed, but visibly shaken, nodded. General Beckett turned again. He stood at attention, looked Logan in the eye. Then slowly raised his hand in a sharp, perfect salute, and said, "No one gets left behind." Ekko let out one short bark, like a confirmation, like a flag raised high. Logan's mouth opened, but no words came. Emily burst into tears, not of sadness, but of release. The moment hung in the air like a sacred oath. The gavel had not fallen. Not yet. And the war was not over. It had just turned. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The judge's hand hovered above the gavel. Her mouth was halfway open. The next second was meant to be final. A sharp rap that would cut through every plea, every memory, every desperate glance between man and dog. Then bang. The double doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open, the sound ricocheting off the high wooden walls like a gunshot. A gust of wind followed, sending a few loose pages fluttering off the clerk's desk. For a split second, the room froze, suspended between decision and disbelief. Everyone turned. The bailiff reached instinctively toward his holster. Emily gasped aloud, hand to her chest. Even the judge straightened in surprise. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the pale light from the corridor behind him. He was tall, his posture unshakably upright. The glint of metals on his chest shimmered under the overhead lights. His presence alone was commanding, the kind of stillness that didn't come from fearlessness, but from surviving everything that could be feared. He stepped forward, boots thudding softly against the floor. His uniform was immaculate, crisp creases down each sleeve. 4 stars gleamed on his collar. General Raymond Beckett. "I apologize for the disruption," he said, voice calm but carrying. "But I believe this courtroom is on the verge of making a mistake." Logan stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. The last time Logan had seen this man was in a combat zone. Dust, fire, blood, and Ekko standing between death and survival. The judge cleared her throat, regaining composure. "And who exactly are you, sir?" Beckett stopped at the center of the room.
I am General Raymond Beckett, retired, former commander of Task Force Raven, 3rd Battalion, Kandahar Division. He pulled a folded document from the inside of his coat and handed it directly to the bailiff. This is a formal override directive from the Department of Defense, signed and executed as of 9 a.m. today. Ekko, formerly designated as Tactical K-9 Asset Number 763A, has been granted honorable discharge from military service. Murmurs erupted across the courtroom. The bailiff took the paper to Judge Clay, who adjusted her glasses and read it silently. Her jaw moved slightly, but she said nothing at first. Beckett looked at Logan. The retired Marine still hadn't said a word. Ekko stood beside him, ears forward, tail twitching slowly. Beckett nodded. You remember the compound in Margar? He asked, not loudly, but clearly. Logan blinked once, then again. Yeah, he replied, voice soft. Beckett turned toward the courtroom. Most of you weren't there. You don't know what it's like to be pinned down behind a collapsed wall with gunfire from 3 directions and no way out. You don't know what it's like to see your men dying and to know you're about to join them. He paused. But I do. He turned back toward Logan and Ekko. They came for me. Logan dragged my body 50 feet under fire. Ekko warned them about a pressure plate mine I never saw. If not for them, I wouldn't be standing here today. The courtroom was silent again, but not the same silence as before. This was reverence. This was witness. I owe them my life. Beckett continued. And when Emily Hayes wrote to me, I remembered that day. I remembered what it felt like to be pulled from the edge. He looked down, eyes wet, but unashamed. I didn't return that debt then. I do now. Judge Clay looked up from the letter. This directive is valid, she said, tone more even now. Signed by 2 current generals and a deputy secretary. It releases Ekko from federal classification and reassigns full custody to Sergeant Logan Hayes. A ripple of reaction swept through the room. Not clapping, not celebration, just release. Logan leaned forward. Is this real? He asked, voice cracking. Beckett stepped forward. He stopped directly in front of Logan. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised his right hand and gave a perfect military salute. No one gets left behind, Beckett said. Not on my watch. Logan tried to return the salute, but his arm shook halfway up. Beckett gently placed his own hand over Logan's. You brought me home. Now I bring him home to you. Ekko let out a low bark, just one, as if to say, we're good now. Emily rushed to her father's side, tears running freely down her cheeks. The judge, visibly moved, cleared her throat. This court recognizes the authority of the override. The case is closed. Ekko shall remain in the care of Sergeant Hayes indefinitely. She gave a single strike of the gavel, but it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a beginning. The court began to move, people standing slowly, still absorbing what they'd witnessed. Emily leaned into her father, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Logan looked down at Ekko. The dog looked up, and in that shared glance, something passed between them. They had fought together. They had healed together, and now they could live together. General Beckett turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back once, nodding again to Logan, and then disappeared through the same doors he had burst through minutes earlier. This time, they didn't slam shut. They drifted closed on their own. Quiet, final, and at last peaceful. The courtroom was still, the kind of stillness that came not from fear, but from awe. After General Beckett handed the official override directive to the court, the papers had passed through formal hands, the seal of the Pentagon, the signatures from 3 top brass, the bolded clause effective immediately. Ekko was hereby discharged from military service and reassigned to Sergeant Logan Hayes as his permanent and exclusive caregiver. Judge Clay read every line twice. She didn't speak for a moment. Her hands, steady and professional, folded the document and placed it gently on the desk before her. Then she looked at Logan. He was still seated, frozen in a state between hope and disbelief. Ekko, sitting at his side, hadn't moved. His eyes had not left Logan's face. The judge's voice, when it came, was softer than anyone expected.
Sergeant Hayes. He looked up. She nodded once, slowly. This court recognizes the Department of Defense override directive as valid.
Effective now, Ekko is no longer a military asset.
The pause that followed made Emily squeeze her father's hand tight.
The judge continued, he is not government property.
He is not a reassigned tool of war.
He is a hero, and a member of your family.
A breath escaped Logan's lips.
Not a gasp, not a cry, just breath. As if he'd been holding it for a year.
She looked out over the courtroom. This case is closed.
And with one final solemn strike of the gavel, it was done. There was no eruption of applause. Not at first, but people stood one by one, quietly at first, like they were witnessing something sacred.
The veteran advocacy group rose together in the back row. A few took off their hats.
A woman in uniform saluted, and then the room clapped, not loud, not wild, but with the steady, rhythmic sincerity of people who understood what it had taken to get here.
Ekko looked up at the sound, his ears perked.
He turned to Logan and tilted his head just slightly, as if seeking permission.
Logan nodded. The dog stood. His stance wasn't tense. He wasn't in guard mode. He was proud.
Emily crouched beside him and whispered something into his fur. Logan looked around the room and then slowly, shakily lifted a hand to salute Judge Clay. She returned the gesture, but then General Beckett stepped forward again. He walked to Logan, his expression unchanged, the gravity of his steps carrying more weight than words could. He stopped in front of him, looked him in the eye, and with complete formality, the four-star general raised his hand to his brow and offered a full ceremonial military salute.
Sergeant Hayes, he said, voice low and solemn. You've served your country. You've saved your commander.
You've endured your own war after the war.
Then Beckett's voice broke just slightly.
He added, and as long as I wear this uniform, I will keep my promise.
No one gets left behind.
Logan tried to speak, but emotion gripped his throat. His voice didn't come. He simply nodded, eyes misted, and placed a hand on Ekko's head.
They didn't need words. They never had.
The afternoon sun had begun to shift westward as the three of them, Logan, Emily, and Ekko, exited the courthouse. The light was golden, softer now, casting long, gentle shadows on the front steps.
A breeze passed through, warm and calm.
The world outside had not changed, but everything within them had. They paused at the top of the steps. Emily was the first to speak.
So what now?
Logan took a long breath of air that finally felt like home. They made their way down the stairs, Ekko trotting confidently beside them.
No leash, no orders, just loyalty.
At the bottom of the steps, a small crowd had gathered. Some strangers, a few reporters, but mostly fellow veterans who had come simply to show up. One elderly man stepped forward and shook Logan's hand without a word. A mother knelt and let her young son pat Ekko gently on the head.
"Thank you," she whispered.
Logan looked up.
"He saved me, and now we save each other."
The truck ride home was quiet. Logan drove this time, his modified controls humming beneath his fingers.
Ekko rode in the back seat next to Emily, head resting on her lap, eyes closed.
The road curved gently through open fields. Trees rustled on either side.
A hawk soared overhead.
No music, no radio, just the sound of wind and the peaceful rhythm of going home. When they reached the farmhouse, Emily hopped out first to open the gate. Logan rolled down the window and looked out at the land.
The wide fields, the old porch, the faded flag hanging under the roof.
He hadn't seen it in months, but it was waiting for him, like Ekko had waited. Inside, the house smelled of wood and coffee and memory. The worn floorboards creaked in the same spots. A photo of Logan, pre-injury, in full uniform, still hung above the fireplace.
But everything felt different now.
Ekko wandered the house like he was checking it for threats, then returned to Logan's side with a low, satisfied huff.
All clear.
That night, Emily made grilled cheese.
Logan insisted on washing the dishes, though it took him twice as long.
Ekko lay curled in his usual spot near the window, eyes on the stars. And for the first time in a year, no nightmares came. Logan lay in bed, the room bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. His legs, or what was left of them, didn't ache as much tonight. His breathing was steady. At the foot of the bed, Ekko stirred, then settled again, his tail brushing against the blanket. Logan looked at the ceiling, then turned to the side and whispered, "Good job, buddy." Ekko didn't move, but his tail thumped once, soft, certain. And in the stillness of that night, Logan Hayes finally slept. Not because he was tired, but because he was whole. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way. Often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.